Zach Williams has been on the fast track to success since he wrote the mega hit song Chainbreaker with two friends. It set a record for the longest running #1 debut single from a debut artist. His album by the same name won a Grammy. Zach, so great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell me about this crazy ride since Chainbreaker and the Grammy. Like, you've been on a wild ride of success.
Yeah, it has. It really has. We were just talking before this. I just finished up singing vocals for a second record, and I don't feel like I've stopped since Chainbreaker went to radio 3 years ago. So
wow,
it's been a whirlwind. Looking forward to the day where I can actually sit back and just kind of take it all in. But right now I feel like I don't want to slow down while I got the momentum. I want to keep going with it.
So tell me about Chainbreaker, because I love that song. It really touches my heart, the words of it. Tell me about the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, so I wrote that song in 2000 and I feel like 15 or 16. Me and my wife were part of a prison ministry at our home church back in Arkansas, and I was working for a church at the time, and I was driving back and forth to Nashville to write every couple of weeks. And I feel like maybe the third or fourth time that I came over to Nashville to write some music. I'd been there for a week, and it was a Friday, and I remember Jonathan Smith, who I'd been writing music with, said, well, hey, we're going to write with a girl named Mia Fields on Friday. You're going to love her. So I like Googled her and checked her out, and she'd written all these like massive songs for people, and I was honestly like a nervous wreck going into to write songs with her on a Friday. I remember thinking, I don't have anything left in the tank. Like every idea I had, I wrote already this week. So like, what am I going to do? And I remember we sat in a room, me and Jonathan and Mia, for like 2 hours, just talking about my testimony and what God had done in my life. And at the time, me and my wife were very involved in the prison ministry. And I remember sharing that with them, and Mia just kind of blurted out, well, you should write a song called Chainbreaker. And I kind of laughed. She was like, I'm serious. I was like, we really write a song called Chainbreaker? She was like, write anything you want. And so I remember Jonathan turned around and played the first lick on the piano. And when he did, I sang the first line of the song just kind of off the top of my head. And they were like, what'd you say? And so we turned around and we started writing, and 15 minutes later we had that song written. And I drove back to Arkansas, and I remember just praying that you know, God would take this song all over the world, and here we are 3 years later. So it's, like I said, it's been a wild ride.
Well, you grew up Christian, so you grew up in this faith, but it wasn't really connecting with you. Tell me about what the disconnect was between your upbringing and your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in I have an amazing mom and dad that at a very early age really, you know, they planted the seed and gave me the roots, and you know, I was in church every Sunday. I was in church every Wednesday. My dad led worship. My mom sang on a praise team. I was in and out of growth groups and life groups. I can remember being in home church. Like, it just seemed like that's all we did. I grew up, some of the first music I listened to was people like Michael W. Smith, Petra, DeGarmo Key. I remember my dad took me to a Petra concert when I was like 7 years old. And that's really all I knew, that and sports. I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to get a scholarship. And I thought if I could get a scholarship, it would take me out of this small town that I lived in. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, 10th, 11th grade, I kind of got to running around with some of the, you know, the wrong crowd, and I found myself using drugs and alcohol. And before I knew it, I'd lost a Division I scholarship to play basketball, and dropped out of high school and was working a construction job, and honestly just thought my life was over. And that's kind of where God steps in. You know, He has plans for your life, and if you allow Him to use you, He'll turn it all around. And for me, it was music that really drew me in and got my attention. Like, I was working for my dad's construction company for a year. I got a chance to go to a junior college and try out for a basketball team. And I tried out, I made the team, got a full scholarship to go 3 hours away from home. And then as soon as school started, I found myself right back in the same situation I was in high school, partying every night, trying to outdo the other guys to impress somebody or this or that. And the day before my freshman season started, I tore 5 ligaments in my ankle, and it pretty much ended my basketball career. And that freshman season, though, I remember sitting in my apartment and my roommate had this guitar that sat in the corner of our room, and I picked it up and I got a chord chart and I posted it on my wall, and I sat at the foot of my bed for a year, taught myself how to play guitar.
Wow.
And fell in love with music. I just fell in love with the idea of writing these stories of these seasons of life that you're going through. But I also started justifying my drug use, my alcohol use, like everything. I thought, well, if I'm going to be a rock star, and I can do all this stuff because this is what goes with it. And I did that for over 10 years of my life. I lived hard and reckless, and it was in my early 30s. I was 29 years old. I met my wife, and she had 2 small kids when we met, and I was lost, she was lost, and for some reason God put us both together, and you know, it's crazy how things worked out. I can remember I was getting ready to go on a tour to Europe in 2012. I'd been just living this horrible lifestyle, and I thought, you know, here I am, I've finally made it. You know, you'd think I'd be the happiest thing in the world. I'm on tour in Europe with the band I've been traveling in for years. Instead, I found myself at like one of the lowest points in my life. And I remember my wife was pregnant with our daughter at the time, and this was our 4th child together. And she said, you know, I don't think I can continue to support what you're doing if you don't make some changes. And I remember having this kind of come to Jesus moment while I was on a bus in Europe, and I was like, you know, God, if you're real, like, I need you to prove it. Like, I believe you're real, but I need you to show it to me, kind of. And I was listening to some music on my headphones. I took my headphones off, and our bus driver was scanning radio stations, and a song by Big Daddy Weave came across the radio called Redeemed. And I was like, what? And I remember going to my hotel room and looking up that song on a computer and listening to it over and over. And I called my wife and I said, I'm done. Quit my band. I'm coming home. And I came home and we never looked back, and we started going to this church in our hometown, and we just got ourselves involved in everything that there was to do. And over the course of about 3 years I've been at that church, everything that's happened now started happening. I started getting opportunities to lead worship. I was asked to be a part of a church campus, and then I was asked to be part of a church launch, and then they gave me a full-time job as a campus director, and then the next thing I know, I'm coming to Nashville to write music, and 3 years after that, we're sitting right here doing this. So it's been one thing after another that God has just done in myself and my family's life over the last 7 years now, that it's kind of gotten to the point of like, okay, like, you know, he kind of has this like way of like saying, how dare you doubt me? Like, I'll show you what I can do. So it's been really cool to know that the songs that I'm writing are being used the way that, you know, I hoped when I was writing them. When you get to hear the stories from, you know, some of these men in prison that we get to go in and play these music for, or you get to hear a kid tell their story of how they were thinking about suicide and they heard Fear is a Liar. I mean, to me, that's where the satisfaction comes in. There's nothing better than that. There's no award or recognition you can get that's better than hearing a story that is linked to something that you wrote, that God gave you a message to share with people.
I think I relate to your story because I also was a person who left the faith of my childhood and did some crazy stuff. And I think there's a lot of parents probably watching who's maybe have kids or grandkids that are kind of like not where they should be and are worried. What kind of encouragement would you have for them about, I guess, parents who pray? I'm sure your parents were praying their guts out for you.
That was it. I say that a lot from stage. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. Pray for your kids. Like, God, those prayers don't go unanswered or unheard. I think a lot of times we're praying for our children wanting to see the result right then, but it's not always that way. Like, God has His timing, and He's going to answer that prayer in the moment that it needs to be answered. And for my parents, it was 33 years later, you know, of a constant prayer over my life. And, you know, I know there were days in my dad and my mom's life where they were like, what have we done, like, wrong? Like, we've been faithful and done everything you've asked, and why is he doing this and why is he going through that? But they never give up. They never gave me an ultimatum, or they made me feel like they were judging me. They just always prayed for me and loved me. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do as parents, is just, you know, give them those roots when they're young, and give them something to come back to. And if they wander off, you know, see the world they at least know, you know, where home's at. And for me, that was, you know, that was Jesus. That was my faith.
So good. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing your story. It's been
Appreciate
such a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.